Warcry, Part 1, by Christopher James Loosely. 6 months before the War of the Gods. Aris stared across the night sky. The tranquil shimmer of the stars filled him with a sense of serenity as he breathed in the cool, clean air. However, the feeling faded as his gaze drifted across the fields of Icaria towards the flickering campfires of the enemy settlements. He was astounded that Azin's army had even managed to get this far north. He'd have thought that King Raiden of Isilanor and the Archmage of Elanta would have halted the invaders' progress sooner. But then again, with the rest of the gods having been absent for so long, he guessed that there really was no way of holding off Azin's conquest. Not for much longer. But still, he'd joined the fight, regardless of the odds. Maybe it was out of a sense of duty, or perhaps a form of repentance, but either way, he knew he'd be a boon to the defenders' forces. For a moment, he reflected on his past. Very few knew what he was, and for 10 lives of man, he'd fought countless battles. Some he was proud of, and some he regretted. Sometimes he fought for peace, to end the reign of a tyrant lord, or quell an uprising. Sometimes he simply fought to line his coin purse. Eternal life has its upsides, but one does still need to eat. However, other times he just relished the thrill of battle, not caring what side he fought for, as long as his sword ran red with the blood of a worthy opponent. This time, though, he knew why he was fighting. Azin, the goddess of shadow and the dark lady of Tenebrae, threatened to cover the entire of Azura in darkness. Other than rumors, no one really even knew why. It didn't matter to Aris. He just knew she needed to be stopped, and he gave no damn as to her reasoning. He unsheathed his sword and proceeded to run his sharpening stone along its edge, honing it for the awaiting battle. Yet his gaze did not leave the enemy camps. He did not know how many thousands they faced, but one of the allied captains had given him the estimate of 20,000. Apparently, the Leonians to the east were having far greater success at repelling the attacks, though Aris was not surprised. Leonians were hulking, half-man, half-lion warriors, born and raised for battle. It came as even less of a surprise when some of the enemy units had been called away to help their comrades against them. Aris had even laughed aloud when he was given the news, silently wishing they had a modest horde of Leonians at their disposal. "Sir, are we almost ready?" asked a voice from behind him. Aris turned to see Taldir, his second-in-command, standing proudly with one hand resting on the pommel of his sword, whilst gripping a spear with the other. His skin was pale, his eyes sapphire blue, which glinted in the firelight, and tufts of his short, blonde hair poked out from under his helm. Aris looked at him earnestly, as he tried to make himself look as tall and fearsome as possible. However, the man was slight, a talented fighter, no doubt, but his frame was of average proportions, not like his captain. Still, Aris found it endearing, unable to stop his stern brow from softening. They were not lovers, for Aris knew he could never allow himself to love someone who could not live as long as him, nor did he want to father children for quite the same reason. Taldir was simply his companion, sharing his food, his time, and his bed. However, out in the field they were professional, and Aris greeted his companion as such.
"We are, Taldir. As soon as the spymaster arrives with news on our target, we'll head out,"
Aris replied as he stood to full height. At 6'5", he towered over Taldir, his armor gently clanging as he moved. He himself had a warm, bronze tone to his skin which, in the light, almost seemed to have an orange hue to it. His hair was almost black and hung past his shoulders, with a few strands passing his deep, orange eyes. His build was considerably larger than Taldir's, through centuries of battle hardening. His muscles were as stone, yet warm like a gentle flame. Aris found it strange that they'd been asked to go on an assassination mission, while he usually preferred to run in with his sword held high. He preferred the glorious cries of battle, rather than slinking around in the shadows, but from what he'd heard about their targets so far, he may be the only one in the army to take him on. His brow furrowed as he thought about the nightmarish description that he'd been given, as well as the sadistic way he'd punish his captives. Taldir noticed the change in his captain's mood, choosing to waive professionalism for a few moments and placing a gentle hand on Aris's arm. The two crossed glances, with Aris's smile returning, as he filled his mind with more palatable thoughts.
Come, let us meet with the others. I'd gauge their nerves before I take them on such an important mission,
Aris said calmly, in his smooth, bassy voice. Taldir nodded, before turning the direction he had come from. The others in question were two individuals who had been assigned to accompany Aris, though they had not made a good first impression. One was a mage from Elanta, hand-picked by the Archmage. He wielded the power of water, earth, fire, and air, and was chosen for his mastery over the four. With these, he could potentially mask their movements, distract soldiers and guards. The other was an Iduard archer from the elite royal guard of King Raiden. She wasn't skilled, she was immaculate, able to pinpoint a target from the entirety of her bow's range. She could fix any possible mistakes made with a quick shot between the eyes. However, they were both arrogant, detestably so. Earlier in the day, Aris had to fight the urge to backhand the pair of them when they were being introduced. To them, he was simply a mercenary, hired muscle. They had openly dismissed the need for his company, noting that his size was unwieldy for such a mission, whilst also implying that a lowly sellsword should not be held in the same esteem as those who have consistently proven themselves to their respective rulers. 1,000 years had taught Aris a great deal about patience, yet these two immediately stuck under his skin. Aris and Taldir found the pair sitting at a campfire close to the general's tent, obviously trying to show off their positions, just in case their pompous attitudes were a tad too subtle. They did not stand to greet them, nor did they even regard their approach. The two had dressed appropriately, with black leather armor, something that Aris was unable to do, to their disgust.
You're going to attract too much attention, dressed like that.
The Iduard hissed, her eyes narrowing into a cold scowl, as the mage grunted in agreement. Taldir growled slightly, but Aris refused to feed into their self-elevation.
Unfortunately, I could not find a level worker who could outfit someone of my size in only 6 hours. If you have something in my size lying around, I'll gladly change,
Aris replied. A short chuckle fell from Taldir's lips, but the other two just scoffed. Maybe, if you'd shown an ounce of loyalty, you could have earned favour from a lord who would outfit you for these kinds of situations, the mage retorted in a smug, self-adulating tone. This time, Aris had to grit his teeth. If they'd known who he was, they would never even consider such words. But Aris had never been one to flaunt position. Not that either of them would believe him. Luckily, before any more words could be uttered and ultimately regretted, the spymaster slipped out of the general's tent, with the two bootlickers standing immediately to attention. Taldir also saluted, but Aris continued to stand as he was, again, to the annoyance of the other two, but even more so when the man went straight to Aris. He was what you'd expect of a spy master, not too tall, not too big, with an effortless agility to his movements. He had shaggy black hair and a thick handlebar moustache to match.
"Aris, you old bruiser, how is life treating you?"
the man asked, a great smile widening on his face, revealing a gold tooth in the left side of his mouth. The two embraced each other as old friends, with a smile curling on Aris's face as he noticed the scowls of the other two.
Well, I've just gone from hunting bandits for merchants to being called to defend the country from a full-scale invasion. I've got to say, it could be going a little better.
Aris replied, a slight smile ever present on his face. He watched, though, as his friend's smile dropped. Spy Master Gallic, whom he'd known since the man had been a boy. He'd even trained under Aris during a brief time that he had been in the military. Gallic was one of the few who knew Aris's secret, and was the only reason why he'd agreed to go on this mission.
"Yes,"
he said finally.
"The invasion was quite the shock. It happened so fast, and before it was barely evacuated before Azin's legions swarmed it like ants,"
he continued, his voice becoming gruffer, more frustrated.
"Should we win this war, God be willing, there are new structural plans for the fortress, so that nothing like this happens again."
As the conversation continued, the archer started becoming impatient.
Shouldn't we get to the matter at hand?
She barked sharply. Gallic turned to her with an intense gaze, one which put her back in her place as her face and shoulders dropped. He turned back to Aris, giving him a discreet wink, which he found amusing.
"Your target has taken hostages, destroyed towns and killed hundreds, if not thousands. This is not new ground for an enemy captain, but this one is different. I have been told that no soldier has been able to land a single blow upon him in battle, despite taking on many foes at once. His name is Varanis. They call him the Shadow Walker."
Gallic shuddered as the name passed from his lips.
Varanis,
Aris thought. He had heard about this man, an elite general in Azin's army, a true monstrosity of a warrior. Rumour had it that he had been blessed by Azin herself, while others believed he was a child of the Dark Lady.
I guess I'll find out soon enough.
"Where will we find him?" Taldir asked, noticing that Aris's mind had wandered. Gallic turned to the young soldier, pointing out across the enemy camps towards a tower in the middle of one.
"My spies have reported that he operates from that tower. You will recognise him from these tattoos. Unlike his soldiers, who carry Azin's marks on their banners and shields, he prefers to wear them on his face. This needs to be done flawlessly. Should you fail, you'll have 20,000 soldiers on you in minutes. You have one chance. Do not let me down."
Aris knew that Gallic's warning was not meant for him. He had more trust in him than that. Instead, his gaze had fallen to the other two, who still looked frustrated at having to work under a nobody. Aris ignored their disdain. He hadn't even learned their names. He'd thought it best that he didn't. Instead, he stared across the field towards their destination as embers from the fire caught in the breeze, swirling around him slightly before cooling to ash. Whilst listening to the rest of the briefing, Aris put out the fire, using its remains to darken the sheen of his armour, as did Taldir. After a few minutes, Gallic had finished giving his instructions, and Aris was itching to get the whole thing over and done with. For the first time in centuries, he was genuinely concerned. Usually, he would ignore the words of warning from superiors or employers, but Gallic knew him, who he was and what he was capable of. No, this time was different. His mind swirled and his stomach felt queasy. Even Taldir's reassuring smile did little more than take the edge off. Aris embraced Spymaster Gallic one more time, shaking hands upon parting. He wished the party safe journeys before heading back to the General's tent, and the four of them set off. They had no torches, and the night was bitter. Aris could hear the others beginning to shiver and, out of a strange sense of sympathy, opted to ease the situation with his own powers. As they walked, the mage realized the air around them getting considerably warmer, yet there was no flame.
"You're a fire mage,"
the man said in surprise.
"You've ramped up your body heat."
Aris rolled his eyes. He wasn't after a conversation.
That's right. I am a bit more useful than just hired muscle.
Aris responded dryly.
If you're lucky, you might even see more of my gifts.
This struck something in the mage. He said, gifts, not powers, not skills, gifts. Curiously, the mage began to inquire further, but the archer got in first.
And what's that supposed to mean?
She asked in a mocking tone, thick with resentment. Aris was too preoccupied to justify himself, so he sought to end the chatter before they got too close to enemy lines.
I'll divulge that information if it suits me. Now, I'd rather not give away our positions over idle chatter rolling across the hill to the enemy guards. From now on, it's silence. The heat dies. Understood?
There were no answers, simply a light growl from the archer, and then nothing. The rest of the way was carried out silently, as they blended with the shadows, nearing the camp. Even from a lower position, the top of the tower loomed overhead, giving off a heavy sense of unease, knowing that their target was most probably inside. They could see shapes now, dim silhouettes against the palisade defences. There were two of them on the outside, piercing the night air with raucous, drunken laughter. The Iduard drew her bow. Drunken prey is easy prey. However, Aris reached out to lower her shot, for the sudden lack of noise might attract unwanted attention. He gestured for Taldir to get on his shoulders, to take a look over the wall. Upon clambering back down, as quietly as he could, a simple thumbs up meant that they were free to dispatch them with no consequence. Once again, the Iduard knocked an arrow and lined up the shot, whilst Taldir reached for a throwing knife on his belt. Upon Aris's signal, the two guards dropped to the floor with a thud. Aris went after the bodies, gesturing for the mage to follow. Using his mastery of earth, Aris quickly lowered a patch of the ground to use as a grave. Once again, the mage looked surprised, but did the same for the second body, before the two of them covered the pair and returned to the others. The Iduard eased her way to the entrance, peeking in to confirm that no one had been alerted. On her signal, the rest of them followed her in. Crouching behind a tent, Aris took in their surroundings, trying to get a feel for the place. The air was sweet with the scent of wine and mead, and, from the looks of it, the ground had seen most of it. But this was good, as the common soldiers were not on the lookout for intruders. More drunken chatter could be heard throughout the camp, and Aris was becoming more hopeful. They were in, they were unseen, and they were close.